The Diablo IV launch is right around the corner, so today I'm going to be showing you my hardcore viable Hammer the Ancients build. I've leveled this build about 20 different times in the beta and the Silver Slam to ensure it works like a charm. And after testing, I can confidently say this is by far the best setup. Now, keep in mind this won't be one of those 10-minute class showcases with untested builds and recycled content. Instead, it will be a full-fledged build guide for the launch covering how the build works, how to properly play it as you level up and transition into the end game, discussing all the skill points and how to allocate them effectively. I will also touch on the aspects that are ideal to have as you approach the end game, and additionally we will cover the class mechanic and options specific to this build. Lastly, we will delve into the Paragon board, including all 220 points, so get ready for the ultimate Barbarian leveling guide build for the launch of Diablo IV, hardcore approved. The Barbarian class as a whole has a few weaknesses, but with the way I designed this build, I will actually tend to cover most of these important weaknesses, so let's go over them briefly. Firstly, the Barbarian has very poor resource management in terms of Fury, his main resource. Without proper gear or skills to help with it, the class can feel pretty terrible to play. Similar to the Druid, when the Barbarian isn't in combat, it loses Fury, making the early game that much more painful. Speaking of early game, the class is purely built around being effective in the end game. It has 4 weapon slots, which means it has the most options for legendary aspects. Unfortunately though, because of this design, the class is just weak early on and suffers for a very long time. Lastly, the class functions around burst windows, and if you don't time your skills correctly, the damage fall off can be pretty massive. Fortunately, with this build, I mitigate a lot of those issues for you. It has really good resource sustain, and on top of that, you're extremely fast due to the multiple mobility skills that also provide resources. With the Deathblow and Hammer of the Ancients combo, you have constant damage uptime when played correctly. Now let's explain how to play it exactly. In most cases, you will start by leading with Leap or Rally Cry. You want to start generating Fury as quickly as possible. The moment you reach about 75 Fury or so, you want to use your Hammer of the Ancients to prime the boss or weaker enemies for Deathblow. If the boss is surrounded by weaker mobs, you want to position yourself in a way that you can cleave them with your Deathblow attack, killing the weaker mob and resetting your Deathblow ability. This will grant you Fury and provide a full reset of the skill, so this is primarily what positioning means when I talk about the build. One very important thing to note is that once you have enough damage on your Hammer of the Ancients, which will probably be around mid game or beyond, you won't have to do this as frequently. Elites or some weaker bosses will just die in 1 or 2 hits. Beyond that, just time your Warcry with your damage burst, and for the most part, the build is pretty simple and easy to play. And yeah, let's dive right on into it. And first off, just so you guys know, I will be leveling with Frenzy first, going into Enhanced Frenzy followed by Combat Frenzy. But ultimately, the way the build is going to actually end up is going to be with Lunging Strike, Enhanced Lunging Strike followed by Battle Lunging Strike. And this is going to ensure you get a Blade. Blade is very important for the build, so it's important you get this. Once you move up a little bit, we're going to head over to Hammer of the Ancients. We're going to grab Enhanced Hammer of the Ancients. We're going to pick up Fury's Hammer of the Ancients. This is a really easy way to set up all your damage. This is going to be your main damage skills, and eventually you're going to level this up to max. But as we level, we're going to grab Rally Cry, Enhanced Rally Cry for the Unstoppable, making you immune to CC, and it can break you from CC effects. That's the purpose of this. And then Tactical Rally Cry. We want to get down here to the Brawling section, so we're going to grab 2 more points in Hammer of the Ancients, and then we're going to unlock this section. From here, you want to grab Warcry and then Enhance Warcry. We're going to stop here, but eventually pick one of these 2 later. It doesn't really matter, honestly. What matters is the Berserking, followed by grabbing Leap, Enhanced Leap, and then Power Leap. This is really nice. You're going to have mobility, and then from here we're going to grab Deathblow. Ideally, depending on where you at, if you're like having sustain issues, you can move over to Raid Leader, but ideally you're going to just be able to, want to level this up and get your Fighter's Deathblow and your Enhanced Deathblow. And then you want to grab Booming Voice and then Max Raid Leader. This is like super good for your build overall for sustain. But if you don't want to go that route, ideally we're going to grab Pit Fighter, we're going to grab No Mercy, we're going to grab Exposed Vulnerability. Now, I don't know how we're going to like allocate it because I don't know where you're going to be at in the game. So if that makes sense, I don't know where you're going to be at in the game, so it kind of just depends, but I'm just going to show you where we're ultimately going to lead off at. You're going to grab Booming Voice, you're going to grab Raid Leader. You're going to max out No Mercy, and you're going to max out Exposed Vulnerability because you use a Weapon Mastery skill, and this will guarantee that whenever you hit with a Weapon Mastery skill followed by a next core skill, which is Hammer of the Ancients, you will give them vulnerability, and vulnerability is very powerful. You also want one singular point in Hamstring to give you the bleeding effect, which is going to proc your No Mercy, which gives you 9% crit, which is absolutely insane for like 4-point investment, which is nice. From here, we're gonna use Unbridled Rage at the very end game, but until then, we're going to use Walking Arsenal. The reason for picking Walking Arsenal is a combination of reasons. One, this is very cheap, cost effective, and you have really high damage uptime. Your leap is going to be your slashing weapon. Your Hammer of the Ancients as well as Deathblow will be your bludgeoning weapon, and then your lunging strike will be your 2 one-handed weapon, whatever you choose to have. So this is going to be like super synergy with the build, and Walking Arsenal is just, in my opinion, the best early game like super perk, whatever you want to call these perks. You want to grab 1 Temper Fury and Furious Impulse. You're going to be swapping weapons, and this is going to give you Fury. You want Invigorating Fury. You don't have to max this, but this will give you some really good sustain. When it comes to this part here, this is great because you're going to be using a lot of bludgeoning weapons. The Wallop is good as it's going to give you increased damage whenever you hit stunned or vulnerable enemies, and you'll be able to do both of those things as a bludgeoning focused weapon. Grabbing Concussions is also pretty decent. You don't have to invest in this one. I like this one for the stun, but you don't have to. Also, another thing to take a look at is Aggressive Resistance and maxing Battle Fervor. Whenever you leap, it's going to give you Berserking, and then you already have Berserking, so just having some extra Berserking uptime is always nice. It's not that crazy of an investment, and you get a massive amount of benefit, which is Berserking, which is a great thing to have. We're going to max out Deathblow. We're going to max out Hammer of the Ancients whenever we get around to it. It's not priority. Priority is getting your skills and getting these other passives. But outside of that, you pretty much max every skill that you have out and you're good to go. So yeah, that's going to be it for the skill section. Am I missing something? Just double checking. Yeah, but that's going to be it for the skill section. You should be pretty good to go. And that's all you need to know. So yeah, let's move on to the next section. Alright, now we're on to the legendary aspects. I'm going to explain to you why I use them. Not all these are mandatory. I think like 1 is absolutely mandatory. The rest are kind of whatever. You can choose to do them if you want to use them. But I'm going to just give you some options that I think work really well with the build. And then we go from there. So we're going to go from left to right. So it's a circle, but you know what I mean. So your helmet is going to be Weapon Master Aspect. This is a great option because what it ends up doing is giving you an additional charge of a Weapon Mastery skill, and in the event that you miss your Death Blow, this will give you a second option to do a Death Blow. This will also have a 50% chance to stun them for 2 seconds. Just so you guys know, Death Blow is a 50%, I believe it is, yes, a 50% lucky hit chance, which means that's a 25% chance to proc. You have 2 of them, so obviously 50%. So this is a really good defensive and offensive utility, and then it's also resource because you get resource for dealing damage with your Weapon Master skill, so super good. We're going to go with Aspect of the Protector. There are so many other good defensive ones that you can go with. For the purpose of this leveling build, this one is guaranteed by the Lost Archives and the Fractured Peaks, so this is going to be fairly reliable to get and that you can slot on, but there's other defensive ones, but this one's really good. I like it. Next, on your gloves, you're going to put Rapid Aspect. This is basic skills, attack speed. I love this for my 2 one-handers because it makes it go fast, like you're just zipping all over the place, and this is really good for it. Again, other options are available, but this one's pretty cool. For the legging, we're going to go with Aspect of Numbing Wrath. Honestly, I think this is one of the best aspects. The great thing about this is you do tend to generate a lot of fury, and the over fury will go towards your fortify, and you can use that to stay fortified. I felt like this was the aspect that kept me fortified the most compared to other aspects by a large margin, so really good. Now for your boots, we're going to go with the Ghost Walker aspect. While unstoppable, which is given by Rally Cry, you get 25% increased move speed. Keep in mind, Rally Cry already gives you a massive move speed boost, so this just makes you farm faster or move faster, but most importantly, it makes you be able to pass through enemies. Why I like something like this is, one, obviously I play hardcore, and getting stuck can be a death sentence. You generally don't want to die, hardcore or not. So yeah, I think Ghost Walker is great because it gives you move speed, it gives you good synergies with Unstoppable, it gives you a defensive option, and yeah, I think it's really great to have. Now, onto the absolutely must-have, most mandatory piece to this entire gear, to this whole entire build rather, and you get aspect of the Ancestral Force. This will make it so that your Hammer of the Ancients quake outwards, dealing up to 50% of its damage to enemies. You put this bad boy on your weapon and this becomes 100% of its damage to enemies, so you get a massive damage boost. This one's mandatory and cannot be not be on the build, but this is an easy aspect to get. Next is aspect of the Expectant. This one's great. Just keep in mind, guys, this one's very confusing to a lot of players. Do not put this on your two-hand weapon. What scales isn't the 50% damage you get from basic attacks, but the hits it takes to get to the 50%. You should be relatively okay because you have rapid aspect and it's going to give you the attack speed you need, but just be careful not to put this on your two-hander because it's a bait. Next is Edge Master. Edge Master and Limitless Rage can be interchangeable. I do think Limitless Rage is better on the high end, but you won't have a lot of sustain early, so you know, just kind of build around it. You know, pick whichever one you want to put in these two slots, but preferably put this in your two-hander, but it's going to be built around the gear you have at the time. Next, we're going to go to our utility slots and ring slots or whatever. First, I'm going to go at the top one, and this is going to be aspect of the Encroaching Wrath. And why I use this one is whenever you spend 100 Fury, which you will spend a lot of, your next weapon mastery skill deals an additional 100% increased damage. This just synergizes way too well because you're going to constantly be buffing it up with Hammer of the Ancients, and those skills work really well together. So I think it's best to put this in the neck. I mean, you can put the other like attack ones or in the neck, but I like this one in the neck personally for me. For your two resource aspects, this combo is like always in all my builds, especially if you have a war cry, and that's going to be aspect of Echoing Fury. And when you shout, you generate up to 4 Fury per second while active. This takes all your Furies into account as individual instances, so you can have up to 8 with this build per second, which is massive. And then I use Bold Chieftain aspect. This will reduce the cooldown of your other shouts whenever you cast it when you're near enemies up to 12 seconds. Let's just look at this. At its base is 25, so minus 12 would be 13 plus the uptime. So, you know, with a little bit of CDR, maybe flat CD, you know, you can really keep the uptime really high. At level 25 in the first beta, I was able to keep a permanent uptime depending on the mob I shouted near. So just keep that in mind, that though it is nerfed, you're probably going to have near perfect uptime. But that's going to be it for the legendary aspects. That's how I would build them. But just keep in mind there's a lot of other options. So yeah. Alright, we're on the arsenal system, and this is going to be the class mechanic for the Barbarian. For anyone who's a little bit newer to the game, I'll explain it to you so you understand what it is. So once you reach level 5, you will unlock the weapon expertise system. This is the stuff on the right, and essentially as you use weapons, you will level them up. So if you're using a one-handed axe, you will level the one-handed axe. It will start at a base level 1 and then proceed to move up to a level 10. Once you hit level 10, you'll get the skills on the right table, the additional bonuses, and that will apply to whatever weapon you're using at that time, as long as it's matching the weapon. Now, once your character hits a base level of 15, you unlock a expertise slot that you can slot any of these expertise into. I would highly recommend, just if you're going to be a Barbarian main, just generally level all the weapons if you can. It doesn't take that long to level these weapons up, and you'll have a lot more build diversity. Now for the build that I'm making, there's a few options that you can go over and use. So I'm going to just talk about them and give you my thoughts on them. So the first one we need to look at is the one-handed maces. This is really good because, one, you're going to be using one-handed maces anyway. as well as you have a lot of stun on this build. You use two-handed bludgeoning weapons, you use one-hand maces. You're gonna stun pretty well, and if you use the stunning stuff that I talked about, it could be useful. So it's really good. And then you can also get some berserking. The lucky hit is very low, but you still have a good chance of, you know, getting that berserking. But you have to do it when they're stunned. But you can double this chance if you're using two maces. So that's a good option, but I mean the base effect is pretty decent, right? The next one for me, I like, and is probably going to be probably the most reliable damage, is going to be the two-handed axe one. If you choose the talents that I told you about, where it gives you the ability to get vulnerable whenever you use your core skill after using a weapon mastery skill, you will guarantee to do more damage for just hitting them. It just basically gives you 15% more damage on top of the vulnerable damage that vulnerability applies, and then you get basically 10 free crit if you slot this in once you get to level 10, which is pretty insane. So yeah, this could give you a crit setup if you choose to go with a crit. Lastly, for me, I like polearm. You do get a lot of lucky hit chance. 10% is not massive, but I think it's pretty good. And then while you're healthy, you'll get 10% more damage. You're going to be very defensive and strong, your barb, so I think it's decent. Two-handed mace is not terrible in my opinion, but I think you kind of have to have a lot of conditions to get it. You need to stun them, they need to be vulnerable, you need to be berserking. For 15% crit damage, I don't know if I would ever do that for that rank 10 power. It could be an option, but ideally, I think two-handed axe is amazing and polearm. So that's what I would use for the arsenal system, but now you know. Alright, we're on the Paragon board, and yeah, I'm going to show you guys how we path it, probably explain some of the nodes for you, but do keep in mind that we're going to take some of this with a grain of salt, as we don't know if there's going to be more Paragon boards that could be more valuable, but these should be pretty decent. You have your starting board, you're going to pretty much grab everything like how you see here. I'm using the rare glyph that is called Irie. This is going to give you berserking, and you're going to take less berserking damage. It's going to give you increased berserking damage while you're berserking. You're just going to basically fill out the stats you need to get it, which is going to be strength. Take all the rare nodes that you can, take all the magic nodes that you can, and then move on. Obviously, you may want to follow it like how I'm doing it, but you know, kind of tailor it to what you like. Next board we're going to grab is the Weapon Master board. This board is pretty nice, as it's a really good pathing to these other two. But we have Hunter Killer. This is like my favorite rare node. It's really good for like if you're actively farming and killing elites. It's going to give you a ton of momentum and attack speed, well, move speed, which is super good. We're using Disembowel here. This is going to give you crit against bleeding. Well, actually, it's going to give you a cooldown reduction, a chance to have cooldown reduction whenever you're killing a bleeding enemy, which is really, really, really powerful. Now, you're going to get increased bleed damage, but we want this for the additional thing, which is basically cooldown reduction, which is super nice. You get cooldown, you get bleeding from your lunging strike, which is really cool. Up here, we're going to move up and grab Warbringer. Warbringer is pretty nice because it has Fury stuff, and more Fury is going to be really good for Unbridled Rage, obviously. You'll be able to hit more when you get to that point, of course. Here we have Crusher. This one is good for two-handed maces. You're going to be using maces for your Death Blow. You're going to use maces for your Hammer of the Ancient, so it's really nice. And then you have, you know, some resistances, some strength, some fizz. You know, pretty much all the stats you need. But yeah, this is all pathed out. Next, you're going to grab Blood Rage. I know this one's a little bit more bleed focused, but you have bleed from your lunging strike. This is going to really prime and set you up for you know, a lot of cool stuff. So I used the Marshal. This is going to be for your shout. This is just going to reduce the cooldown of shout after you press one. And again, we're mainly getting this for the bonus. And obviously, just keep in mind these nodes look a little small, but you can actually upgrade these to level 20. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Paragon board, just know that while it looks a little low now, it actually goes up, and you'll be able to get more benefit as you level up your glyphs. So yeah, we're going to path this way like this, grab the magic nodes, fill out the stats we need to get the best benefit, and then grab, you know, the carving node. It's going to be pretty decent to bleeding enemies, damage to elites, this is a lot of stuff you want. It's really good. Head over to the hammer tree. You see this build is actually really important to have lunging strike with the bleed on it, because of like you're actually going with a lot of bleeding stuff, weirdly enough. But this has been the best path so far. You're gonna grab some damage over time stuff. That's not that important. You're just grabbing the node because it's here. But damage reduction from bleeding, really good. And then the main node is gonna be blood feeder. You have increased crit strike chance 5% when you fill out the dex against bleeding enemies. That is insane. Just flat out 5% for just hitting, and that's at its level 1. Imagine a higher level. This is super good. Very easy to get, and should be easy to path this way. Finally, we're gonna head over to the last tree, and this is gonna be Bone Breaker. This stuff has a lot of overpower, which you can eventually, you know, become an overpowered build, so it's really nice. And then yeah, we're gonna just path this way, grab the Vigor node, grab the Brutality node for the overpower. Just a lot of overpower stuff here if you want to grab. And then we have Might. This is going to give you increased damage with two-hand weapons. Remember, we're using Death Blow and we're using Hammer of the Ancients. This is really valuable to that. And that's pretty much it for the Paragon board. 220 points. There's probably more optimal ways to path this out, but as far as I can tell, this is pretty nice. You should be pretty set up to go. Alright, that covers everything you need to know about the Barbarian class in the build. I trust that you'll find it relatively easy to reach the endgame with this build, as the damage output is amazing once you have all your skills and synergies in place. I'm confident that Hammer of the Ancients is probably the Barbarian's strongest skill, based on what I can tell. Now, if you have any questions about this build, I will be live streaming it on YouTube on the launch day of Diablo 4, so feel free to come and ask me anything. Creating this video took many hours, not just in editing, but also in testing, so if this video helped you out, please hit the subscribe button and like it for more Diablo 4 content. Your support means a lot for me, and I'll see you in the next Diablo 4 video very, very soon. Later.